please.
Good morning, Commissioners. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Pinelands Commission was given in compliance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act by providing notice to all municipal and county clerks within the Pinelands area and to the Secretary of State on December 21st, 2018, and the Commission's officially designated newspapers on December 20th, 2018, and by posting a copy on the Commission's website.
Thank you. Good morning, Nancy. Could we have roll call?
Sure. Good morning and Happy New Year. Commissioner Ashman, Commissioner Avery,
Here.
Commissioner Barr,
Here.
Commissioner Chila, Commissioner Galetta, Commissioner Howell,
Here.
Commissioner Janarone, Commissioner Lloyd, Commissioner Lobauer is running late, Commissioner Pikaliski,
Here.
Commissioner Prickett,
Here.
Commissioner Quinn,
Here.
Commissioner Rowan Green,
Present on the telephone.
Chairman Erlin.
I'm here. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first item on our agenda is the adoption of the minutes from December 14th. We have actually two sets of minutes, December 14th's regular minutes and then November 9th's closed session minutes. So we'll start with the regular minutes of December 14th. We have a motion.
I'd like to move those minutes.
We have a second. All right. Any questions or comments on the minutes from the 14th? All right, hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
All right, 2 abstentions. All right, next we have the closed session minutes from November 9th of 2018. Do we have a motion?
Darcy, okay. Yes.
I have to abstain.
I have to abstain as well.
Okay, I got your miss. Sorry.
I wasn't here. You can I, am I allowed to?
Yes, you are.
If you read the minutes,
Okay.
We're okay with the vote.
Well, I need a motion before we do any voting.
So moved.
All right, are there any questions or comments on the closed session minutes from November 9th? All right, hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Got it all, Jess?
Should I abstain? Or no?
Are we good? Okay, we'll move on now to committee and staff reports. Actually, there are no committee reports. There was no P&I and no P&B meetings. The next policy and implementation committee meeting is scheduled for January 25th. So we'll move right along to staff reports.
Okay. And so you could see I have a lot of room today because Larry is sick and Stacy's sick and a lot of sickness going around. As you recall, right before our last commission meeting in December, Jonathan Mead from National Park Service came here and we had a great meeting with him and we finally had a good contact and then we had follow-up phone calls and then we were going to meet and then there was a government shutdown, so we've never heard from anybody again. And we're just waiting. So one step forward, one step back. You'll notice that the visitor center area is still cordoned off because we still don't have all of our construction approvals from the local construction officials and state construction officials. We had a few things to work out. Paul may or may not tell you all the details, so we're still getting there. Some little things are still being done. Some electric stuff had to be fixed. So that's slowly moving along. Hopefully it'll be resolved this week and then we can move forward with letting people actually go in there. I don't know if it was earlier this week. I guess it was earlier this week you received from us copies of stay requests that we got on the New Jersey natural gas pipeline. We got a stay request, and then we got a response, or I'm not the lawyer, and Stacy's not here, and I kind of bother Christina with it, from New Jersey Natural Gas. This is a legal matter. Doesn't involve policy, doesn't involve anything like that. Because the New Jersey Natural Gas piece came in so late, we didn't get it from the Attorney General's office until just a couple of days ago. Stacy hasn't been here, so we haven't had a chance to really go through it. Stacy's job is really to make sure that the facts are right, consistent with what we did and all of that, and that it's consistent with all the CMP arguments, if there are any. The legal work is done by the Attorney General's office. So without her, we don't have it, so we're not ready to discuss it. So you have it, you've read it, and when we finalize the response, we'll go at that.
Would that be with a resolution, upcoming resolution, or just a discussion? Do we know, or is now not the time to really talk about it?
There'll be a resolution. There'll be action. Action will be required on the part of the commission, yes. That's all I have.
Any questions for Nancy? All right, what's up?
Good morning, commissioners, members of the public. Happy New Year, everyone. I just had a couple of items that I wanted to mention. The staff met with Medford Township officials at the beginning of the year with a pre-application conference. Medford Township is going to be building a new, or proposing to build a new municipal building. The second item I wanted to mention is that we have an upcoming meeting with Lacey Township and Ocean County officials to discuss modifications to a shooting range, enlargement of the shooting range in Lacey Township. And the third issue that I wanted to mention was we've been working with the mayor in Estelle Manor over a couple of issues in the township. One concerns a parcel that is allegedly being used for recreational vehicles, and we're doing a site inspection and working closely with the city on that issue. That's all I have.
I forgot I have one more thing. We've been trying to schedule the first meeting of the still to be named Energy and Sustainability and Committee. We just we can't corral the commissioners. So Jess is working hard. We're trying to come up with a date. Maybe we'll try to do it after the upcoming P&I meeting, since most people will be here. That might be easier, but I just wanted you all to know we're trying. So within the next week or so, we'll get you all together and we'll have that meeting.
Are there any questions for Chuck?
Just a couple quick things. One, we had put out a public notice and we had a public hearing on a proposed amendment to the Pinelands Infrastructure Trust Fund Master Plan, which we shared with the P&I Committee in November. We had that hearing in the evening on January 3rd. There were 2 members of the public in attendance, and we've received, I think it's 4 or 5 written comments. All but one are positive and in support of the amendment. And the comment deadline has concluded, so we'll be preparing a final version of the amendment in response to the public comment, which you and I will see on the 25th, and hopefully the full commission will have a resolution before you in February, so that we can move forward with that. And the only other thing, sort of a good thing that we're working on that some of you may not be aware of, Tony McNichol, our archaeologist, has underway quite a project, quite an ambitious project, an excavation, the Brotherton Indian Reservation in Chemung in Indian Mills. We've just begun that, doing ground penetrating radar surveys for 3 days, 2 in December and 1, I think, just last week. And they're looking for, areas to avoid and where artifacts might be, so that we can then better define the boundaries of the excavation, which will be done hopefully in March in the spring. So that work is underway. We're very excited about that. There's going to be videos and all kinds of brochures and a website and all of that. And hopefully, Tony, when that work is done, and we're working with the Archaeological Society of New Jersey, they will come to a future meeting and show you the things that they found and the work that's been done. It's really quite exciting. So we're looking forward to that.
I turned around to see if Tony was here, because Tony actually came into my office with some of the
he's
things
yes,
that
he's got
they found.
It's amazing what they found.
Oh, sure. So cool. Yeah, it's really exciting.
Okay. Rick, you had a question?
Yes. I wanted to ask about the Brotherton excavation and the role of the commission in getting involved in that. How was that? How did that occur? I mean, who's working with who? Who initiated the effort?
So the site's owned by Chemung Township. So it was through our work in cooperation with Chemung Township and Tony's interest, I think, in, obviously he's known about the site for a very long time. There's a lot of interest in it. And so I think it was when Chemung was here and we were approving their new cemetery, and it all sort of came together as a piece that he was very interested in, and the township was willing to let us sort of lead the project and do most of the work to their site. But in a sense, we're doing a cultural resource survey for them that the township will then have should they want to do anything further with the site, although it sounds like they're leaning more towards just having it, as open space for the future.
So it's a collaboration between
It
the
is,
township
yeah,
of,
it's their site.
Chemung.
Tony's doing a lot of the work. Again, Archaeological Society of New Jersey will be doing the actual excavation. Tony's doing a lot of the pre-work and arrangements and making sure everything's in order. They will actually do the physical work and the excavation. Tony will do a lot of the publicity, and he has someone who's come and is doing video for us. So it's a really nice collaboration between a number of individuals.
Do we know what's going to happen to the artifacts? Are they going to be on
Well, it really
public
depends
display?
what's found, but they will belong to Chemung Township. It's their property. So we'll work on some arrangements for displaying some of them.
Certainly
Maybe here.
digitizing them.
Oh,
would be
absolutely. They'll all be recorded and preserved and all that. And then it'll just be a matter of where do they reside after that.
Great, thank you, thank you.
And Tony also did a lot of coordinating with local tribes.
Oh, yes.
It was a very significant thing that had to be done before we did anything. It's a very complicated political world that Tony
Right.
sort of very respectfully worked his way through. It was really interesting to see it all play out. There's been a lot of work.
But you mentioned Indian Ann. Indian Ann, she was, I think, the
Yes.
last of the Indians that resided there. She, I think, left the reservation with the rest of her family, and they came back later, and she stayed in Tabernacle and weaved baskets and sold them. And she's buried actually across from Nixon's store in Tabernacle.
Right.
So,
Yes. That's it.
Any other questions for Susan? All right. Paul, what do you got?
All right. Good morning. Happy New Year. We are still working to finalize the last pieces of the puzzle before we can open up the exhibits. As you may recall, Nancy mentioned at the last meeting that we needed to do some things to satisfy the requirements for the inspections, particularly electrical work. That was done yesterday by our electrician. So that part has been done, and there's a few touch-up things that need to be done as well before we sign off. Meanwhile, though, that doesn't stop us from having the inspector come back to look at everything to make sure everything's good. Once that's done, we'll get our CO, and then we can open it up to the public, and we can open up this building again for regular traffic for our customers, as it were. So if anyone has any questions about that, please let me know. Things are going well. We've been caring for the fish, and they're doing well. Haven't had any casualties in a while. Makes me happy. So meanwhile, we have put out the brochure, and we have begun registration for the 30th annual Pinelands Short Course, which is March 9th at Stockton. This year, we'll have 36 presentations and 23 new ones. 4 members of your staff will be delivering presentations. Chief Scientist John Bonnell will be doing his course on frogs and toads, as well as a new course on timber rattlesnakes. That course will feature a live timber rattlesnake, which will be housed in a secure tank, so no one needs to worry there. And Marilyn Sobel of the Science Office will be delivering a presentation on Pinelands plants. Archaeologist Tony McNichol will do a course on the history of the Head of the River Church in Estelle Manor, Head of the River Cemetery in Estelle Manor, and Joel Mott will be doing a course on the local history of Tuckerton. We have a number of really interesting courses this year. This being the 30th, we thought we'd have a special celebration afterwards where there'll be free cake and coffee, and people will be able to gather and share their experiences over the years. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Any questions for Paul?
I'll ask a question if I may. How's the registration going so far?
It's been brisk, yes. I haven't checked the numbers. Joel, have you checked the numbers lately? Yeah, it's going well. I know we've received a lot of emails and phone calls about it. I know people are excited about it. We're looking for a lot of people this year. We have a very solid lineup. So, and once again, Joel sent out an email. I should mention commissioners are always invited to attend at no charge. We always encourage that. So.
Very easy to sign up. Just at least in my situation, I just sent Joel a email with my selection and it worked quickly. How many people did we have last year?
I want to say about 600, 550. Is that about right?
Above what we had the year before. My goal for this year is really 700. That might be pie in the sky, but I hope we have enough. We do have the capacity to get seats, so it's just a matter of getting people to turn out.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else for Paul? All right. I believe that's it for staff reports. We'll move on to our public development applications. We have 2 resolutions. The first of which has 2 projects on it. One for traffic control systems in Hamilton and Egg Harbor. And the second is for utility, it looks like utility work within Medford Township. Do we have a motion on the first resolution? Your second? Anything from staff on this one? Okay. Any questions or comments from commissioners? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, resolution moves. Next up, we have a resolution, as I said, for, next up is for construction in Woodbine Borough of a, it looks like county or road work to County Route 550 and 610. Do we have a motion on that resolution? Okay.
I'll move that resolution.
Second.
Anything from staff on the Woodbine resolution?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any questions or comments from commissioners? All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Resolution moves.
Thank you, Bill.
You're good, Bill. All right, we have no planning matters on the agenda. Next, we have public comment on public development applications and resolutions where the record is not closed. So these are applications that will be coming before us in the near future. We have 3. One is road improvement, or I'm sorry, dam improvements in Winslow Township. The second is right-of-way improvements in Woodbine Borough, and the third is a waiver of strict compliance in Jackson Township. If anybody in the public has anything on these 3 applications, feel free to step up, identify yourself, and give us your comments. All right, seeing none, we will close that portion of public comment. We do have a bunch of master plans, and ordinances. They do not require commission action, but I'll ask Sue, is there anything on here that you feel the need to go over? No? Okay. Move on. Next up, a resolution to adopt the fiscal year 2017 audit report. Do we have a motion on that?
Second.
Very good. You have a second?
Second.
Second here. Nancy, would you like to hit the highlights on this, or do we want Alan to the chair to take it? Sir.
I'll take you. This is the first time since I've been back on the commission that our audit has no significant findings. The audit committee and the personnel and budget committee have made recommendations on investing in our financial records keeping system, which has paid dividends. Appreciate that hard work on the staff as well to merge the old system with the new system. And it's resulted in a much smoother, I think, record keeping. If you're in government, it's very important to have to the citizens that provide the funds that we expend, that we do so properly and that they're properly audited. And the past findings were procedural in nature. They weren't misuse of funds, but it's just good to have an absolute clean audit. I want to thank the public members of the audit committee that donate their time to the commission, Brian Logan and Mike Mansdorfer. And I also want to recognize former Commissioner Ed McClinchy. Had a lot of input into the financial record system, and his experience in Winslow was helpful to me in particular. So it's any questions on the audit? It's no significant findings. And clean bill of health, and I guess they're working on the other one. They're getting ready to.
They're not here yet.
But we already had the pre-audit meeting,
Yeah.
so it's always another year. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent, excellent. Any questions regarding the audit? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, moving right along. Next, we have a presentation for the Buena Borough MUA.
So, and
Good morning, Commissioners. We're going to do a two-part presentation. We have distinguished guests with us today. Dennis Yoder is the wastewater treatment plant operator for the Buena Borough. I'm sorry, he's the licensed professional engineer, the plant engineer for the BBMUA's treatment plant. And Alan Zorzi is the operator of record. He's the licensed operator who's done a tremendous job at operating that plant. So I'm going to do a little bit of background, and then I'm going to turn the presentation over to our guests. This is an aerial of the treatment plant. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it because our guests have some tremendous aerial drone slides that show the facility. But one thing that, before I jump into my presentation, I just want to point something out. These wastewater treatment plants play a tremendous role in protecting water quality in the Pinelands. And of course, we all recognize that they're treating wastewater that comes to them through a conveyance system, the pipelines that are connected to homes. But another important role that these plants play is that they treat septage that comes out of septic tanks. So if you've got a septic tank in the Pinelands, that pumper is taking that very concentrated, high-strength wastewater to Alan's plant, discharging it, and he takes care of treating that septage through his very advanced treatment process. So we're going to talk about a memorandum of agreement that has enabled us to basically take a bad situation and make it great. So I've got here an MOA success story. Another way to phrase this would be when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. Because this is a story of how local groundwater and soil permeability limitations that restricted the treatment plant's ability to discharge wastewater to the groundwater led to a state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant in the Pinelands, one that DEP tells me is the best in the state, improved water quality in a Pineland stream, the permanent protection of 232 acres in the forest and rural development area in Buena Vista Township, and the elimination eventually of septic systems that are in that area because this advanced treatment plant will allow that service area to expand to pick up some areas that are right now problematic for us in terms of the concentration of legacy septic systems. So this is a slide that basically is going to orient us. You can see the treatment plant is here and it discharges to the deep run tributary. So that's a discharge line that was permitted. I've got slides that talk about this. Back in 1968, 1969. So this is one of these situations where we had a treatment plant, it was a good thing in its time, connected to a stream like was the case in the 1960s, and it's something that we're living with today. I'm just going to ask you to hold this in your mind. This is what I call the Donato tract, outlined in red there. That is a 60-acre apple orchard that the BBMUA had purchased with the intention of using it for land application. we're going to talk about that. That was the subject of the first MOA that affects this particular project. And then these areas down here along Route 40, these are the areas where I talk about we're going to be sewering areas that have septic systems at densities that we would really like to eliminate. I mentioned earlier that we have 232 acres of permanently protected land that's a result of this MOA. And these parcels in pink, in addition to the parcels in green, identify permanently protected land that comes about because when we enter an MOA, there has to be an environmental offset. So the permanent protection of these parcels was the offset in exchange for us authorizing the MOA. So the partners to the MOA are the Buena Borough MUA, Buena Vista Township, and the Pinelands Commission. And I say here MOAs because there were actually two of them. The first one we entered into in 2007, and that was to permit the treatment plant to develop that 60-acre apple orchard that I had referred to in a Pinelands agricultural production area. And an MOA was required there because we don't allow wastewater infrastructure in those ag production areas. But we thought that it was the right thing to do. We got permanent land protection and we were going to allow it. As it turns out, that site was proven not to be capable of accepting the volume of wastewater that would be sent there. And that necessitated the second 2011 amendment that allows the treatment facility to continue to retain its discharge to the creek, but only with the implementation of advanced state-of-the-art treatment. So the circumstances that led to the MOA, this is one of those things where we just inherit a problem. In 1969, it was a great thing for a rural community to have a wastewater treatment plant to eliminate septic systems. So that original plant was built and it was authorized through a DEP permit to discharge its wastewater to the Deep Run Creek. But 19 years later, the federal government comes out with the Federal Water Pollution Control Act that imposed much stricter discharge limits on these types of plants. And the current plant back in 1969 was incapable of meeting those standards. Neither federal standards or state standards. So that was recognized. The BBMUA and DEP entered into an administrative consent order that basically laid out a construction schedule for that plant, the original plant, to come offline and for a new advanced plant to be built that was capable of meeting those new state and federal standards. That was coupled with a request for the flow to the original plant to increase. And that's often the case because you're going to build this new plant at a cost of millions of dollars, and it's not atypical to want to expand the user base so that the existing ratepayers don't absorb that hit directly. So they asked for an expansion of their flow to get more ratepayers, and that's a great thing, but that necessitated that discharge pipe to the stream be removed according to Pinelands regulations. So had the plant stayed there in its original form, it could continue to operate under a grandfathering provision. But as soon as you propose to increase the flow, the CMP kicks in and you've got to eliminate that stream discharge. So 1990, the new plant with greater nutrient removal capabilities was constructed. That plant was approved by the Pinelands Commission with some conditions, and two important conditions were that a force main be built from the new plant to convey wastewater away from the stream and out of the Pinelands area was the original intention, so that it would comply with that CMP requirement, and that the deep run discharge be eliminated by 1995. Those were the conditions. So in 91, the new plant becomes operational, and now the BBMUA sets out to identify alternatives to the stream discharge. So they identified three in conjunction with the Commission and DEP. One would be to discharge wastewater to the Blackwater branch outside the Pinelands area. The other would be to land apply it through either spray irrigation, overland spray, or infiltration lagoons. And the third option was maybe well injection, either deep well injection or shallow well injection. So over a 5-year period, those alternatives were evaluated. The discharge to the Blackwater branch was ruled out. Now that would have been outside the Pinelands because the stream didn't have sufficient flow to dilute the wastewater that would be discharged to it. So that was ruled out on the basis of a stream study. The land application was looked at in two fashions. One, spray irrigation. The volume of wastewater would have required 300 acres of land to spray irrigate, and that quantity of land was just simply not available in the area. And recharge basins on the order of about 30 acres of such were deemed to be problematic based on regional shallow groundwater and clayey and silty soil conditions. Deep well and shallow well injection were both looked at. Deep wells would have injected the wastewater down to a confined aquifer, one that's brackish, so it's not a potable source, but the silty and clayey nature of the subsurface down to 2,000 feet or more prevented that deep well injection option. And shallow well injection would have been to, on the order of 115 to 195 feet, where they did have some sandy permeable material they could inject into, was ruled out by DEP because there is a concern that you'll get well screen fouling. It's very easy to pull water out of the ground. When you put water back into the ground, there's precipitates that form and clog that well screen. It was something that DEP was very cautious about, so it too was ruled out. So all of these options are ruled out. The plant continues to discharge to the stream, and the 1995 deadline wasn't met. So there could be no new connections to the treatment plant other than those related to a public health hazard. So the borough was in a bind. 2003, they identify this 60-acre parcel, that's that red outline parcel where they're going to use it for land application. They did some preliminary work. It looked like it was going to work for them. And then in 2007, the three partners, the MUA, the township, and the commission, we execute a MOA to allow that facility to be constructed in an ag production area. And that's where we got to 232 acres of permanently protected land. So we thought we had a solution. The BBMUA was able to acquire $4 million of funding from the USDA to build that wastewater facility. So it was a win all around. However, we asked USGS, we were working with USGS under contract at the time, to take a look at the test results that had come back from that Donato property, because we were concerned that 400,000 gallons per day put on that site every day, and ultimately going to 600,000 might result in a mounding of the groundwater table. And USGS, who's got very capable of groundwater modelers, called us almost immediately and said, do not let this project move forward. The site geology is not suitable. And it's borne out by some of these maps. This is a NRCS soil map, and the areas in red identify sites that have very limited capability to accept rapid infiltration of wastewater. The areas in yellow are somewhat limited, and they're limited because they've got shallow water table and clayey conditions. So in conjunction with that NRCS map, the USGS had done a study for us at the Hamilton wastewater treatment plant, and they put together this map that shows surficial geology. And you can see that the Hamilton facility over here and the Buna facility are in that same orange Bridgeton formation. And USGS told us, be wary of that formation. It's got interbedded layers of silt and clay that will restrict the downward flow of wastewater. So we, on the basis of this information, decided that we really couldn't allow that wastewater infiltration facility to be built. But we had $4 million of USDA money that the USDA was willing to work with us to see that that money was awarded to the town. And we scrambled, all of us scrambled, to put together a proposal so that we could take that $4 million and upgrade the existing sewage treatment plant so that it would basically provide the highest level of wastewater protection that's being achieved anywhere in New Jersey, as a condition of allowing that pipe to stay in the stream. And that's what led to that that second MOA. The second MOA retains all of the environmental offsets that the first one did. It required that the plant be upgraded to incorporate this membrane bioreactor technology. There's a handout in each of your packets, an EPA handout. If you're interested in membrane bioreactors, there's a great summary of how they operate that's before you. And we incorporated this additional condition that stipulated that the plant had to attain 24 consecutive months of meeting incredibly rigorous discharge standards for nitrogen and phosphorus before we would say the plant met our objectives and now you can increase your flow from 400,000 to 600,000. And I can tell you, when a new plant comes online, it's difficult it's a biological system, so it's difficult to get it stabilized and consistently attain the levels of treatment that are necessary. So we didn't get 24 consecutive months in the first 24 consecutive months of operation. The plant operator had to really work at this to get it to work. But I can tell you that in February of 2018, this is cause for celebration, we attained 24 consecutive months of compliance. And I can tell you that as we were approaching that 24 month, I was sweating it and Alan was sweating it, because one bad month would have set us back to zero. And he'll tell you that these plants are very dependent on ambient conditions. These are microbiological plants, and microbiologic activity tends to shut down at about 4 degrees centigrade, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. So when it's cold out, it really is difficult to keep these organisms viable, to provide these levels of treatment. So as we were going through the winter months, we were sweating it. But the plant has met all of those objectives. And the happy ending is that because they met that 24 consecutive month deadline almost a year ago, Nancy, our executive director, was able to notify the DEP that we are now in a position to authorize an amendment to the wastewater management plan for Atlantic County and allow that plant to go from 400,000 to 600,000 gallons. So that's all I've got. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dennis Yoder. Like I said, like I bumbled, Dennis is the director of engineering at Remington and Vernick, and he's the guy that basically brought the engineering expertise to bring this plant to the town. And Alan Zorzi is the plant operator, but he's not just a wastewater treatment plant operator. He operates the collection system in town and also their water, their system. So these are very skilled water pollution control professionals that have worked as close partners with this commission, and I wanted to take the opportunity to bring them here so that we could express our gratitude. Dennis, you're up.
Thank you. Ed's covered a lot of things that I would have told you about the history, you know, and working with Larry Liggett and Ed over the last 30 years on this plan project has, they've been really good partners with the MUA and the authority. And as a professional, I've done a lot of projects over the last 40 years. And this is one of my favorites because it's such an environmental success story. And it's a gem that you have there in the western part of Atlantic County. The limits and the discharge that this plant is putting out is not being met anywhere. The stringent limits here, I'm not aware of any other plant in the country that has these effluent discharge limits. There were a couple plants in Florida, but you're dealing with a much different climate there. And as Ed mentioned, when you were dealing with the biological activity, and as the temperature goes down, it's exponentially less active. So part of the success, a lot of the success has to do with the operations of the plant, and they really are committed to making this successful work. And what they've done there with a limited budget has really been outstanding. So I'm not going to get a lot of details about the technologies and everything what we've done there. And but I do want to just go through briefly. The 2.0 nitrate was the original standard that we had to meet, along with a 0.15 phosphorus, which are really stringent limits. And then when we came to the conclusion that we wanted to possibly consider expansion, what we would have to do, we went from just the nitrates to being a 2.0 average as far as your total nitrogen. So that includes your ammonia and your nitrates. And unfortunately, we've been able to accomplish that. The the early part, when we first put it online, we had one of the coldest winters on history, and when the temperature of the wastewater dropped down to 6-7 degrees Celsius, the biological life just really died down. One of the things with the membranes that we can talk about, what the advantage of the membranes is, when you're dealing with a clarifier and filters, you only can have so much solid loading and so much biological activity in your plant. So what happens is then you got that only can be just so you can have enough time for settlement to happen out before you clarify and send to your stream. When we deal with membrane technology, you're not dependent upon that. So we're able to run our solids in our plant at probably double the level of what you could previously. So you can actually get, you're doubling your biological activity in your plant. So there were some challenges which Alan had to work through with maybe adding a little carbon certain times that the year as a food source to feed that extra biological and so forth. And that was some of the things that they played around with and has made the project successful. So I'm going to turn it over to Alan now, and he's going to maybe just run you through the plant, just a little bit of what's involved out there, and not to bore you very long, but go ahead.
Switch it.
Yeah, I think the arrows here.
Okay,
Aerial for this, or?
I could just go through here to, as Ed mentioned, 1992, the wastewater treatment plant, Remington and Vernick Dennis designed this plant. 2013, we added the membrane biological reactors. Just goes to show you where the process flow. We have flow equalization tank, and I'll go through the aerials to show you where that was at. We have a screen, anaerobic zone, which is no air, an anoxic zone, which is no air, an aerobic zone, back to an anoxic zone. We add aluminum, like he says, alum, to help with phosphorus removal. The old plant had clarification, sand filtration, UV disinfection, and effluent discharge into deep run. Here's a few aerials of the plant. Right here you can see the original plant. That was the 1969 plant. We converted this tank here to flow equalization, so we feed the tank at a lot slower rate. This is a sludge holding tank with our septic receiving station. It's a carbon source that helps us achieve these low limits. We do composting here. We have in-house composting, in-house lab, and you can flip it over, Dennis, or fuel. And it shows you our composting facility, flow equalization, and the sludge holding tank. This is a good photo of the plant itself. From the flow equalization, you'll see this is the fine screen. The screens that were added help protect the membranes. As we go through, I'll show you a little bit about the membranes, but the membranes are almost spaghetti strands. It's like pores in your skin. So I'll show you how that works. You can flip it. This actually shows what the design criteria was, and I'll go quickly what each zone does. Once it comes into the fine screen, you have an anaerobic basin. In this anaerobic basin, you have no nitrates or air. And what basically happens is the phosphorus is released, and so the cells can absorb more with the air. So from there, we go to your nitrification basin, which is another no air basin, an anoxic basin. Here you're converting your nitrates to nitrite gas, which is stripped into the atmosphere. Then it goes into the carousel. Here's where we put high-speed aerators in here, or aerators on variable frequency drives. That helped because prior to that, we had just high and low. So the VFDs actually speed up and slow down, so it gave me a little bit more control of this area. This is your nitrification zone where you're converting your ammonia and oxygen back to nitrates. The nitrates are fed back to the anoxic zone to strip some, and then they're fed into the second anoxic basin, again with no air, and that would strip the remaining nitrates and into the MBR feed line, which was the old reaeration basin, and it's pumped to the MBR plant. This shows you our conventional plant, what it was compared to the MBR. This is what we did. We added a fine screen. Again, the fine screen protects the membranes. You have to consider, again, with the membranes, they're spaghetti strands, just a bunch of spaghetti strands, and the pores are like your skin. So a hair could foul them. So you try to get as much out as you can with the fine screen. It's a headworks. It's very important to have that. Next, we modified our recycle pumping because we weren't returning anymore. So we did add a firm recycle. We installed, like I mentioned, improved the aerators for better mixing and energy efficiencies. We replaced the clarifier filters and undisinfected with the MBR process. So basically, instead of UV, the bacteria can't go through the pores, so you don't need the disinfection. It's already disinfected that way. We added the carbon feed source. That again helps us achieve the low limits to just a food source. This is at the actual MBR plant. As you can see on this side, this is the pumps, the tank with the clean water. These are the tanks that hold the strands. This would be the top, looking down into the membrane, and it's back pulsing. It basically aerates so nothing settles out and it keeps everything moving. Inside the cassettes, what they would look like. Again, as Dennis showed, that's what's hanging there. Thousands of these, and they're just pouring. What we do is we feed the solids at 5 times the rate of what you're pumping out. When you feed it at 5 times the rate, if you went 1-to-1, it would almost be like a belt filter press and dry it out. So you're feeding at a higher rate, so it pours out clean water. And if I really wish I would have got a picture of a glass of our effluent compared to a glass of drinking water. That's one of the things I show people when they come to the plant. Choose which one you want to drink, because you can't tell. It's drinking water quality what we're discharging.
Drinking water standards is 10 parts per million for nitrates. We're doing 2 for total nitrogen.
So it's really an incredible process to see. These are just some charts to show where we were at. The first one is the total suspended solids compared to what we're permitted, the limit at the top, and what we're achieving on the bottom.
We're consistently 3 or below.
This is the BOD. This is the phosphorus monthly average, as Ed mentioned. The first year, many operators, when a permit changes, we have a grace period through the DEP to try to work things out. Well, unfortunately, I didn't get that with the MOA. It was just, here's your limits, try to meet them. So at first, again, we had a very tough winter. But
and again, plants that have a 0.5 phosphorus limit, that's really considered a very stringent limit. So challenge, and we've been successful.
Here's our nitrate monthly average. Again, way below our 3.
We've consistently meeting the 2 since the 1992 that first plant.
Here's our ammonia. That was the total nitrogen again that first winter.
Yeah,
that's a little tough.
That was when we hit that 7 degrees Celsius. Just experimenting on what we have to do to deal with it.
My permit prior to this MOA also, just so you know, one part, the ammonia part, nitrate and nitrite, was a 35. So I went from 3 parameters, combining them into 1 parameter, total nitrogen. So it was...
And these are monthly averages, so you're putting 3 different samples throughout the month of composites. So you can get 1 bad hit in there. You're getting such low numbers. Mess you up, because the other 2 aren't going to pull you back down.
This is our compost facility. Again, we waste and belt filter press. We have biosolids. It's really a nice product. And again, the solids are discharged to this. We belt filter press them. And
yeah, they've been doing this for 35, 40 years, and it's been excellent. Dealing with the biosolids, the way they deal with it, they aerate it, they have very little odor with it, the way they control it. Basically, they create a product that landscapers want. Basically, type of sexual situation which you can deal with.
It's considered a Class A sludge, so it could be applied to farm fields. So a lot of farmers also get it for the nutrient benefits. And this actually shows our finished product to the left. We mix it with the wood chips. That's our belt filter press. So basically, we press the sludge, we mix it with wood chips. It sits in the process for 51 days, and then it's tested and can go out to consumers.
And that's pretty much a summary of our plan and our operations. We're really proud of what we accomplished, and it really comes down to really good operations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Are there any questions?
Two questions. One, what's the cost of the system relative to, I guess, the the best Nexus? And second, I presume it's secondary treatment, but I could be wrong.
It certainly is advanced technology, and the operating cost is significant. The ratepayers do have a higher rate. We were able to get part grant, part funding through USDA for this plant expansion. And part of the logic was, in dealing with Ed too, when we were back in that making a decision whether we were going to go land discharge with the property, not a property they had bought, was there was really concerns about the long-term viability of the groundwater discharge with the mounding and everything else. So the thought was, let's put the money into the technology and really put the state-of-the-art plant in place. That's what happened. Now, there is a lot of operating costs. Fortunately, that fine screen is important. The life of the membranes are 7 to 10 years, so we are looking at capital costs to actually go in there and replace his modules. There is a cleaning process which they really keep after because they're trying to extend the life of that. So, we've been in that line for 7 to 10 years now, 7 years now in operation, and they're really not getting a drop off in productivity. So again, that goes to the way they're maintaining the system and doing it. So that's the big cost with it. We obviously have aeration costs. As part of this project, we were able to put more energy efficient aerators in there, a better mix system, and that has helped the process also. And so their energy costs, even though with that extra in there, hasn't really gone up that much. But the big cost is the membrane, and they haven't encountered that yet, but it's something they sort of budget for.
The membrane actually came down in price throughout the years. The first and the second cost estimate to around $1 million. This competition is starting, people developing the membranes. It seems like the cost for replacement is actually starting to develop.
And if I might add, Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, and the MUA also put in a solar field next to their sewage treatment plant, so they essentially tap into clean renewable power through metal power sources.
Let me ask a simple question, I think. Is it 50% more expensive, 100% more expensive, 200% more expensive than a typical, or maybe than the old plant? Yeah, that's the comparison that's appropriate.
I would say that they did get rid of their filter system and so forth, and they would have immediate replacement, things with that. So maybe their expense is 20% more than what it was budget-wise previously.
So it's operating 20% more?
Yes.
And then how about capital?
The capital, and that includes the replacement of the membranes that you're budgeting in there and all. But the capital cost was the $4 million. They probably, of that, what was half of that was grant, so they did have the $2 million capital costs, which they have over a 30-year period that they're paying back off. So the debt service on that is something that was added into it.
And how does that capital cost compare with the traditional plan?
Well, since for a plant this size, their cost is pretty significant. Their user cost is more on the higher end, but that was something was factored into what the grant loan portion was from the USDA, what was reasonable for that. But they run on a tight budget. They do a great job for the budget that they have to work with, but they're not really there. They don't have a big capital expenditure budget based on where they are with incomes coming in and their operating costs currently.
What would it take to begin to replicate this in the Pinelands, in New Jersey, and throughout the country? I mean, this is fantastic. You guys are doing a great job. I'd love to see it everywhere, but what would it take?
Need more Allens.
And I suspect more money, but
it does. Yeah, there is definitely the capital cost. The original plan back in 1992, that upgrade was around $3 million. That same upgrade today probably would be $6.5 million to do something like that. And then again, we were $4 million to add the membrane system and do some of the upgrades with the fine screens and so forth that the plant. We would like to do more. We would like to add an extra fine screen ahead of the plant and have double screening in there, but there was limited budget, so we did the best we can with the monies we had available.
Technology is always changing, so, over the next 5 years, something might come along that's actually, because that thing was built in 1992, it's also pretty numbers, so.
So, I mean, we have an EPA memo in our packet, which I confess I haven't had a chance to read. But is EPA promoting this anywhere else in the country?
I know that like the Chesapeake Bay region a number of years ago did a big initiative. Their limits aren't this low, but they're probably more stringent than a lot of the other areas. So that was a big initiative. So I'm not sure what they're doing regionally and all, but usually it comes down to the similar capacity of the streams and where you're discharged. You're dealing with a small tributary here, so your limits, your effluent limits definitely do go up because the stream doesn't have as much system capacity. And the background in the deep run with the farm runoffs and everything else, it just made it, there was no assimilative capacity there to take in more nutrient loadings and everything else. And that all factors into the fact that it becomes, we would use the argument, well, we're way better than what the stream quality is. But the fact is that's not an excuse because, long term, you want to do something with the farm runoffs and things like that, so the water quality standards are met. So the fact that there may be upstream issues made it even more stringent for us as far as there was no more room for us to put any additional loading in there.
Are the water quality standards being met in Deep Run now?
They are, yes.
Last question, I think. On the temperature spikes that you're concerned about, is there any way to induce heat in the system to prevent that spike from going too low? I guess the temperature.
Yeah, that's a what you learn over the years. One of the things I might have done different is I might have made the tank walls higher and so forth, so you had less thermal loss over things like that. So you're going back, like what could I have done different that would have even made this better? That would be one of the things that would have done is like maybe built something in there. But then again, now it comes to the dollars and things what you were to do there. If they had anaerobic digestion, they had a heat system, they had gas coming off, but they really have a good compost facility, so we're not going to go there. But obviously there was a way you could increase that, but we'll work with it. I think we're better ready to respond to the cold weather now since we've gone through that one cold snap there where we had to deal with that.
Mentioned earlier is have more solids. There's more bugs. If you have less solids, bugs will die off faster. Now you have double the amount of biological activity. So in theory, maybe they last helps to treat bugs.
Thank you both again. Congratulations. This is a real great story. Thank you so much.
No, good.
Yeah, I've got a question. Is this, would you consider the capital stuff, is this like off the shelf technology or is it all custom fabrication?
Well, the initial process, I actually went in, when we were going to design, we're like, who's making this kind of limits in a cold weather climate? And I actually went with the previous operator and one of the board members out in British Columbia. They had a plant that was discharged into a lake, trout lake, that they had actually water intake for their city water supply right near their discharge. And so we were able to go out there and look at it and get an idea on the technology, which is our echo process. So we did modify it and put it into a carousel situation. So that was a little bit of the background of how we came up with this is the process we want for this situation. And so there's always things changing and improving. Like when we changed like the whole mix system, aeration system, we did replace that when we did the membrane upgrade. And that was the energy enhancement and a better mix, better treatment. So technology does improve and change, and we certainly keep an eye out for that.
You're to be commended for your operation and your design, but is this a technology you think that could be scaled up to? I mean, this is a relatively small operation. It's 600,000. Would it work on a plant, say, of 38 million gallons a day?
It certainly could. obviously your scale and your cost, but the cost goes down exponentially because, the bigger you are, you're just dealing with bigger motors, bigger aerators, and the number of basins and so forth, and we've done significantly. But it's the technology that can be implemented. So OCUH could do that.
I'm trying to ignore that, but that's my plumber. That's more important than anything here. I have to call him back. So, thank you. My wife's back. It's more important than anything.
Go ahead.
I agree with everything that's been said. It's phenomenal what can happen when municipalities, engineers, and the commission work together to improve the quality of water in the Pinelands. I understand that this system is better at producing quality water by removing a lot of different things other than nitrogen and phosphorus and the solids. Am I right in assuming that this removes also some of the chemical compounds, the medicines that are released in the septic system that typically go into the streams? A lot of them have ability to affect the fish because their hormones is the word I was looking for, affect the fish and the animals. So I'm curious whether this system removes most of those medicines and compounds.
Ultrafiltration, and I think when it came down, we actually had a chart that we showed him, what could fit through the membranes, and I believe that was one of your questions, and it was taking out pharmaceutical.
It was interesting when we first put the plant back online. We had a final. We kept the UV disinfection that we had in place originally, so we were going through the membrane biofilters, going to permeate out, and going out, going through UV, and then through a discharge. And we were getting 0 fecal count off of our membranes. So after a year or so, the DP said, so we kept the UV there, but we're not really using it at this point in time because we're getting zeros. And so we haven't done any additional testing on some of these other constituents, which are now things that concern us, which really needs to look at in the future with all pharmaceuticals and what's happening. And so they're not regulated. We didn't have the budget to basically do that testing. We feel like we are getting some of that removal. So I couldn't stand here and quantify that and say, what's being removed at this time or not. But it'd be an interesting study in the future.
Has anybody else done those studies? I mean, it wouldn't have to be Buena Vista to do that. I don't think the EPA or Canada or other.
There's research going into it. I don't know particulars on where they stand with that. I know it is an issue of concern that hopefully is going to be coming attraction.
In the future, over the next couple of years, 10 years, decade, do you think we'll see more of these plants in New Jersey and the Pinelands and across the country?
It really comes down to EPA and DP and their regulations. Unless they promulgate new standards, like the obviously the regulations usually what drives the technology and drives people doing that. You have a hard time getting people to step forward and spend the money without having the requirements to do that. So that really comes down to environmental regulators and what they can accomplish. So you can do a lot if you're required to do it. And that's
a case in point what happened here and with all the entities involved. I'd like to thank you in the Pinelands staff, Ed, for and also Larry for putting all this together. Commission requested this a number of months ago, and I know it took a while to iron out all the kinks and everything to make it presentable to the public. Not everybody likes to hear about, effluent. I personally find it very interesting. I just would.
We should have brought water because it actually started.
It's in these bottles.
Yeah, we're drinking it now.
All you had to do is bring a glass, what do we know?
Well, that kind of leads me to my last question. The water that's coming out of this plant, in some areas, they don't have enough drinking water. How it doesn't sound like something you want to do, but really, if you look at the science and the quality of the water, why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah, we did reach out to the White District Golf Course and say, hey, we really have good quality water here. It's actually better than what you're using for irrigation. But they didn't want to invest into doing it at the time. But yeah, it's certainly a water that could be used as a resource somewhere. So we're certainly have our ears open to opportunities for that. We don't have that in place at this point.
It's all also public perception. You know, it's
Yes.
wastewater. That's what people think. You know, it's like I've actually had some farmers. You know, there's a winery in town. I would love to use it. It's irrigated winery. Unfortunately, if people found out, they would say, "Well, you're using wastewater on there." So,
Well, I guess that's really up to all of us to change the public opinion, because the science shows that the water is a quality that is not going to be harmful to human health. So, I mean, from what I'm hearing in any case. So, thank you guys so much. And Nancy, thank you for, supporting this presentation.
It took so long because originally the presentation was 7.5 hours long because they were all so passionate about it. So we had to keep trying to scale it down. Yeah. It was a good thing.
John, all is well, my plumber's there, in case anybody was worried. I had one other question that I want. What is your rate to your ratepayers? Is it a monthly, just a standard bill, or?
it's quarterly. And I think right now it's four something a quarter.
For something a quarter. And the septage that you accept, is that only from within your service area? Or
No, it's not.
so you take septage from a broader area?
Yes, yeah, and it's a good revenue source for us. It
Mhm.
also helps with treat. It's a carbon source. Like
Right,
we're talking
right,
about
I understand.
carbon seed, that carbon source is critical to achieving such revenues.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I am not going to ask a lot of questions. You've heard them. I just want to add my thanks. I think this is an extraordinary story, both in terms of the success that you've achieved for the sake of clean water, but also the incredible story about persistence and dedication. I mean, near 30 years worth of effort, many opportunities for you all to have just chucked it all in and said, this isn't working, we're not getting anywhere, but you stuck with it. And as Commissioner Prickett said, a terrific story about cooperation between our staff and in collaboration with you locally to finally come up with this great result. And I don't know what the answer is to try and create more Allens. I don't know, Alan, you might know more about that, but I do know we have a terrific staff, and I'm very grateful for this long-term effort that they put in here, which really has yielded terrific results. And I'm sure you are grateful too. We're really grateful for your collaboration with us. I hope that this is going to become a great example that other communities will want to emulate. I would certainly support it if other communities wanted to try and do what you have done here. Who knows, maybe our infrastructure fund that will be available is something that might be something you could support more development of this membrane technology in other sewage treatment plants. I'd certainly be interested in looking into that. And one other thing, I do have a question. If you would be open to showing us around, if any of us are interested in seeing, I for one would be interested in coming and looking at it, looking at your compost product, looking at your effluent and all of that, and seeing how the system works. I'm not going to make any promises. Nancy's challenging me to say I may well do that. So
Switch them around, yes.
okay, it's like the Coke Pepsi. Like, I don't know. It's okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Thank you again, guys. Great work. Great presentation. All right. We'll move along now. We have general public comment as Paul runs feverishly to get the list of sign-ins. Excellent. All right. We have a general public comment here. As always, please step up to the microphone, please identify yourself, and please try to keep your comments to approximately 3 minutes. First up is Paula Yutkowitz.
Thank you. I've been coming to the commission meetings now for a long time, and it seems like the agenda, the issues that you're tackling is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and you're seeing your mandate as smaller and smaller and smaller. And I see the zoning issues, the applications is very important, but there's also very important things going on that it doesn't seem that you're making a priority to tackle. And one of the things is accessibility to the Pinelands Reserve. Right now, the average New Jersey family with the average New Jersey automobile cannot get into the interior of the Pinelands. It is impossible. Our major road, a major road such as Quaker Bridge Road, right out of Atzine Ranger Station, the average family can no longer go down that road. At the end of the road, there's 2 campgrounds. They can't get to them. They've been shut out. Unless you have a very large 4-wheel drive vehicle, you can't go down the road anymore. It's so damaged. 2 years ago, I believe on Stagecoach Road, $100,000 taxpayer dollars was put into repairing these mudding holes. I went down there this week with my full-size 4-wheel drive Chevy pickup truck, and it was hairy. There was one that was hairy. So now Stagecoach Road is off the map for families. And I think that's a very serious, one of your mandate is supposed to allow for recreation in the Federal Reserve. And families can get to Atzine Ranger Station, they can get to Batstow, off of main roads, off of 206. But other than that, they are absolutely shut out. They cannot take their vehicles on this road. And I think that's very significant. The damage to the roads and the amount of tax dollars that have to be used to fix them, and the fact that we are shutting out most of New Jersey residents from going into the reserve. I would like to see one of the commissioners make a motion, because this is such a serious problem, it's going to get to be such an expensive problem, to have this issue become a permanent part of the agenda. And it's addressed at your monthly meetings, why it's happening, the solutions to it, always keeping in mind that we want the public to have access to recreate in the Pine Barrens. With that, I'd also just want to put you on record so that you're aware, things are starting to get very iffy down there, scary. There is no law enforcement. Incidents are starting to pile up. We had a superintendent threatened. We had a woman cowering in an automobile because she was afraid of the people. She was there alone and was afraid of people that were doing this. I'm putting the commission on notice that somebody is going to get hurt. God is my witness. Somebody is going to get hurt. It is getting very aggressive. It is getting very bad. Bands of men, big trucks threatening people in the woods. We know there's no law enforcement, and they know there's no law enforcement. And after somebody gets hurt, I don't really think that you have the right to say, well, that's the state police, that's this department, that's this department. Someone's been hurt. I just don't think you can ignore it. I would like to see it made, these 2 issues, access to the woods and law enforcement made, because it's so serious, made as permanent agenda items that you will address at every commission meeting.
Thank you. Ryan, and I can't read the last name, Grech or Grach? I'm sorry.
No problem. Ryan Grech, Pinelands Preservation Alliance. Good morning, everybody. I have here PPA's State of the Pinelands report from 2018. If you haven't seen it yet, I have copies for everyone if you are interested, as well as members of the public. I have plenty. I would just like to highlight a couple of things from 2018 in terms of congratulations to the Pinelands Commission. We highlighted the work that your staff has done on the roadside best management practices regarding early successional habitat for native plants, and working with municipalities copies and some of our staff on that. We also highlighted the science report that came out last year regarding wetlands and pond surveys. We certainly see that as a very valuable report, as well as was alluded to earlier, the short course. Always a highlight. Congratulations on getting to 30 years. I'm actually registered to go this year, so I'm looking forward to that. A couple of things that I wanted to mention that we saw as areas for improvement from last year, we certainly hope would become priorities this year, were the proposed CMP amendments. So in particular, there are 3 that we would hope that you would focus on for this upcoming year. These are amendments that sort of have been in the works in some cases for almost 10 years. We have the Pinelands Development Credit Program amendments. These are some of the longest standing ones, and we would certainly hope to see those worked on and integrated into the CMP this year, as well as the water allocation amendments for the Kirkwood-Cohansey Aquifer. This is an issue that in particular we see as becoming urgent, as well as protection for the Black Run headwaters. So this has, I understand some work has been done in this area, but it hasn't been officially incorporated into the CMP. And we certainly see it as urgent that the Blackwater headwaters receive particular protections. My last point is just that, you know, the State of the Pinelands report this is a 12-page document. And if you look at it, we really crammed a lot in there. There's a lot of text, a lot of things that we covered from last year, 2018. This is just a sampling, just a small fraction of the things that are going on in the Pinelands, the issues that need to be addressed. And the agenda for this board has not been reflective of everything that goes on in the Pinelands over the course of the year. So we hope moving forward in 2019 that the agendas would really address some of the things going on in the Pines. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Smith.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Deborah Smith. I am a resident of Burlington County, Southampton. I would like to say that I've been coming to these meetings frequently because of my alarming concerns about the actions and inactions of this commission. I don't represent any special group, but I do speak for many ordinary citizens and residents in the Pinelands. I've heard some positive ideas and plans today. That water presentation that we just had was amazing, although I do have some questions. I don't have any credentials to ask those serious questions, but what I can say is that due to the actions, especially in the last year, under the chair of Mr. Erlin, it's clear to me that there have not been, it seems that the commission has lost track of its responsibilities. The comprehensive management plan is clear to me. And I started calling the governor's office, and I call many times. In fact, there are times when I'm calling daily to request that he look more closely at the direction of the Pinelands Commission, especially during these last few years. Now, there are rules put in place to ensure protection of the Pinelands, and it seems that they have been either subverted or ignored. So I've been asking Governor Murphy's office to make a commitment to correct the wrongdoings of the past administration's ignorance of the extreme importance of protecting these wetlands. I've asked him to make new conservation-minded appointments to this commission. I'd like him to bring this commission back to focus on their true responsibilities, the responsibilities that were entrusted to you all. I'd like to have integrity restored. And to my knowledge, Governor Murphy now has the opportunity, just to my knowledge, I may be wrong a bit, but I feel that from what I've read, Governor Murphy does have the opportunity to replace or to reappoint all 7 commissioners with Senate confirmation under the Pinelands Protection Act. So I've asked the governor to replace Mr. Erlin, with no disrespect intended, as chair, because I feel it's critical to ensure that the commission as a whole does the job it was intended. And we need to have someone who is more conservation minded. As of now, I don't feel that that's been the case. I think it can be better. In these times of trouble and climate change, and of all the forces that come to us in every direction for growth, and pipelines and dumping and poaching, there's just so much going on that has not been looked at. Business as usual, I don't think is acceptable anymore. I really would like it if the governor could change the chair, because we're extremely unhappy with how this commission is going forward. I feel that the Pinelands need commissioners and leadership that understand the comprehensive management plan and believe in its mission. I understand that I'm not in your position and it's difficult, but I'd like to have the commission uphold this important mission, even when you're under political pressure to do otherwise. So there are many regulatory improvements needed. The Kirkwood-Kahanacy, the construction of the pipelines, the devastation of the forests by unlawful ORV use, poaching and dumping of trash and chemicals. These I see always, and I don't always see it on the agenda. So no disrespect intended at all to any of you. I have always tried to stay aware of what's going on. I have not always come to the meetings in the last year, so I have. And that is truly because of my alarming concern. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak here today, and I look forward to some positive changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Agnes Marcella.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good.
Welcome back.
Happy New Year. Thank you. Just want to speak to a couple issues I heard today first. Facts can be interpreted and spun in different ways. So I urge you to adopt a resolution to grant a stay on the SRL. So whatever the staff comes back with, I urge you to grant that stay. I want to congratulate Chairman Erlin with your appointment to the Burlington County Republican Committee Chair.
Thank you.
With that in mind, I think you might want to consider resigning your seat on this commission, because, you know, you got a lot on your plate. Mayor of Lumberton, your day job in the private sector, and serving on this commission also requires absolute bipartisanship, which might now be a little tricky considering your recent appointment to the head of the Republican Committee in Burlington County. So, you know, again, no disrespect, thanks for your service, but if you got to go, we understand. So, you know, that would be something you might want to consider. I also agree with some of the comments that I've heard. The agenda seems to be getting smaller and smaller. You never seem to address the mutters, and they do cause a lot of damage, and they can be scary to people that want to take their kids out there. Remember when I was younger, I would go out there camping and I would see people, you know, bring their horse trailers out there and you know, enjoy the pines on horseback. I don't think that's going to happen with the state of the roads now. I don't think you got a lot of people with horses out there. So that's another thing to consider. We are urging our new Freeholder board to replace you, Mr. Erlin. reason being because the chairman holds a position, it steers the ship, and also would be able to start proceedings to replace the director. Because again, the director, has done some egregious things, going behind your back to give approvals without the commissioners having any role, and doing that in more than one case, and also trying to get the public's right to appeal out of the CMP. I mean, that has been kind of a mandate of the director, which kind of goes against the CMP. There, if you want to take a gander at this, there are 31 places in the CMP that the public's right to appeal appears. That we have the right to appeal the executive director and their decisions, and the executive director would like to get that out, formally negate this right. In more than one occasion, she's tried to do that. So, we can't ask the governor to replace Ms. Wittenberg, but because that's your job, and I don't think Mr. Erlin is in any, that's not your bet. You're not going to be looking to replace Ms. Wittenberg. So, that's another one of the reasons we'd like to see you enjoy your private life. So thank you again because I know you guys don't get paid, and you got a lot going on in your life. You might want to consider spending more time with the family. Thank you.
Agnes, it's good to see you again. Thank you for your concern.
Mr. Chairman, before the next speaker comes up, I would ask that they consider refraining from personal attacks either on commissioners or on the staff. If you have a complaint about the commission and its agenda, that's fine. Just don't direct it to any one person, and particularly the staff. I've been on this commission for a long time through some very emotional debates, and we've always tried to not have a personal attack or personal messages in the public comment. And I appreciate people that come up to the mic to focus more on what the commission does, not any individual. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
I'm sorry.
Amen.
I just wanted to second that. Thank you, because I know you both work very hard.
Thank you. But we'll continue on. Rita Romano. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming, Rita. Margot Pellegrino.
Hi, Margot Pellegrino, Medford Lakes. I've been missing a lot of the commission meetings. Sounds like there's a lot of good stuff going on, as well as the usual stuff that makes people all flustered and ruffles their feathers. I did hear, is this true that there is now a committee in the Pinelands Commission to look at impacts of climate change on the Pinelands? That's awesome. That's awesome. Because, I do know, one of the reasons the roads are so impassable is not just because of overuse and abuse, but it's also just because we have more rain. I have friends that have sump pumps that have really never, like one friend in particular who has 2 sump pumps in her basement that usually never are on, but now they're on 24/7. Another friend who has a little farmette in, off of Old Indian Mills Road, and it's just a swamp. It's just an absolute swamp right now, her fields. And I think this year might have been a record breaker for rain. And we're going to keep seeing this stuff. And of course, this leads me into the presentation that I came here today to listen to, which I really hope that you guys can drive some press and media to this new treatment plant, because especially if it's going to address pharmaceuticals, and from what I understand, from what I heard, this little snippet is going to go beyond what US EPA recommends for nitrates and phosphates. I think that's absolutely huge. But if something addresses pharmaceuticals, which is a huge problem around the country, if not around the world, where people have access to these medicines, as well as our microplastic problem, which I remember at this commission sitting and listening to someone go on about a prototype septic plant that was getting jammed up by, remember that? It was the problem with the prototype septic tank was it was getting jammed up by microplastics. Of course, we know in the Great Lakes, they're taking some huge strides to remedy this issue because the Great Lakes also are their drinking water. So I really just want to commend you on this, and I really do hope that you make sure that you have a ton of media on this, because towns like my town in Medford Lakes could benefit greatly for an upgrade. I'm pretty sure our sewer plant's overdue for an upgrade anyway. I know that there was a little bit of a skirmish because the golf course would love to have our gray water, but Birchwood Lakes wants it. So, I mean, hey. So anyway, thank you so much. And I do hope that you guys can make a big stink about this, because when we have positive stuff, it's a good thing to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Margo. That concludes our list. Was there anybody else from the public who did not sign up? Mr. Akers.
Good morning. I'm Fred Akers from the Great Egg Harbor Watershed Association. I'd like to just kind of make a reference that I was asked to be on a memorandum of agreement working group, a committee some time ago to review the process, the MOA process. And I think that the example of the Buena Borough MOA is an example of how the process is supposed to work, and it was successful to work. So that process, it's part of the CMP, can work very well. There's a good example of it. I also wanted to make a comment about the short course. Last year, I looked at the selection, the curriculum, and I wasn't enthused, so I didn't go. But this year, I looked at it, and I'm really excited about it. And I see some, kind of threads of interest. In particular, Joel was able to get Joe Martucci, who is the weather guy from the press, to do a presentation. And I think that kind of fits in with the idea that the commission is going to be looking at climate change in a separate committee. So there's a weather guy who might be helpful for that. And this is a final comment. I'd like to thank Commissioner Pikulicki for your resolution for the League of Municipalities to fix the payment in lieu of tax program for open space. And that's something that the River Council that I represent and the municipalities in my purview are very interested in getting that payment in lieu of taxes program fixed and brought back, because that's not really an incentive, but is some kind of mitigation for towns to host open space. And it's something that the Christie administration cut by a third, and they transferred the management of that from Green Acres and DEP over to the Department of Community Affairs. And as the administrator for the River Council, I would look for the Green Acres update of the pilot program every year. They would do an update of where all the municipalities would stand. And then I would pull out the ones for the River Council. There's 12 municipalities, and then show them, where they stood on that. So that's an issue that I think we're in the beginning of maybe getting a bandwagon to do that. And maybe there's an opportunity for the commission to weigh in on that at some point. I'm scratching my head. Is it just the governor can fix it, or does the legislature need to fix it? I'm not sure where the target is, but that's an issue that going forward, I think, is a good one to get that fixed. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. I didn't see any other hands. Was there anybody else for additional comment? Once, twice. All right, we'll close the public comment portion. Before we get to comments from commissioners, just to speak to Ms. Yudkowitz's comments, I did see our staff feverishly writing down the issues that you presented regarding access on the certain roads. The agreement that we've had with DEP and with the Forest Service is that we would work together to try to accommodate and to fix any of these issues, whether it be law enforcement or access issues. So we will bring it to their attention. And if the public has any other roads or issues that you know of, you're the eyes and ears out there. Let us know so that we can identify them with the DEP and work together to make sure that we do keep access open into the state forest. So that being the case, I'll take any other comments from, and Nancy will try to give us an update for the next commission meeting. Any other comments from commissioners?
I have a question.
Yes.
Or comments. I was wondering, let me ask the executive director whether what Fred was talking about, the payment in lieu, would you evaluate that to see if it would be appropriate for us to make a resolution in support of increasing that? I don't know whether it is something that is appropriate for the commission to do, but I know how important it is for those payments to go through. And so maybe at the next meeting, we'll find out about that. I appreciate that. My second question is for Mr. Yoder, if I may ask, or at least present it. The microplastics that Margot brought up. Not too many people are aware of the microplastic situation, and it's really easy just to forget, just to deny that they're even there. You don't really see them. But how does the MBR plant that you were talking about address the microplastics?
So, obviously there's, Alan talked about even the hair that started cutting and that's up. So the fine screen is taking out that, and then we are landfilling and everything. So we really could use a second fine screen. If we have a 2mm screen, we would really like to have follow 1mm screen. That's a future project, but those type of things are a concern. But the screening is what's taking care of it at our plant.
So those materials end up in the landfill, and the solids end up in the compost building.
That's correct.
Thanks so much. And thanks for the opportunity to ask those questions.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to ask Nancy if at our next meeting, and I realize it's probably best to let sleeping dogs lie, not disturb them, but I feel I should. A few months ago, the DEP withdrew their application to us with regard to, the forestry application for the view at the fire tower. Things have quieted down, but I think this would be a good time to follow up and see, and if you could let us know, are there discussions going on with DEP? I'd hate for it to, find us back at critical fire season again and not having tried to come up with a resolution of this. So I'd appreciate a follow-up and a report on that. Thank you. And Happy New Year, everyone.
Any other comments from commissioners? All right. And I believe we have nothing for a closed session, right? Correct. All right. So that being the case, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right.